and thank you for joining me today on this Master Investor session to explore how to invest your way to financial independence. I'll be talking to you a bit about my background. I will explain to you what FIRE is, the acronym FIRE, which stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. I'll then walk you through my thoughts around how to invest your way to financial independence based on my personal experience. My name's Ken Okoroafor of thehumblepenny.com and financialjoyacademy.com. Both are platforms that I've created with my wife to help as many families as possible. We've chosen the number of at least 10,000 families to achieve financial independence this decade. We've chosen to do that because at the age of 34, I became financially independent together with my wife. And this might sound usual or unusual to you, but for me, it's quite an extraordinary thing to have achieved at my stage of life, especially given my background. I'll be diving into that in a second, but I'll just take a moment to tell you a bit about my professional background. I trained as a chartered accountant here in the UK, and I've worked for about 14 years in the investment management business, working across various areas of asset management and ending up in venture capital. And across those various areas that I've worked in investment business, I've held a variety of roles. I started life as a trainee chartered accountant, became a management accountant, worked my way up to become a financial controller. Eventually, I became a UK finance director for a NASDAQ listed company. And over time, carried on working my way up to become a chief financial officer for a venture capital business, raising millions of pounds to invest in companies in the creative industries here in the UK. So I spent those 14 years really working in entrepreneurial environments and really understanding money by speaking to high net worths and super high net worth individuals, but applying my learning to my own personal life and using my learnings to design an entirely different personal life for myself and my wife. Now, let me take you back to my very beginnings. I'm a first generation immigrant to the UK. I've only been living in the UK since 1998. When I moved here with my family, I was 14 years old, and we started life with absolutely nothing, from ground zero, without any of the rights that people might have ordinarily, whether it's rights to the NHS or rights to claim benefits or anything like that. We had none of those rights, which meant that we really had to start life beneath the surface and just essentially work exceptionally hard, hustle and do whatever it took to essentially to buy some bread and some milk and to survive. And then I carried on through the hard work and through education and schooling to begin this journey of actually going to university. I got a first class degree at university studying economics and accountancy. And then I somehow landed myself a training contract at a top 10 accountancy firm here in the UK, and that was really the very beginning of my career. Through my career, I've also gone ahead and done an MBA at the University of Cambridge, which for me was actually a wonderful experience, a good way to kind of expose myself to a challenging environment, to learn and to further myself even more. Now, parallel to all this stuff happening, I was also doing something else, which is why I'm actually here speaking to you today. I was working towards a goal of becoming financially independent. I was working towards that goal with my wife, my life partner, in being able to create a totally different life to the life that my parents had lived, which is that they were immigrants who moved to the UK in their 40s and began at the very bottom and started to work every minute in the day to provide for us as their children in order to give us a totally different life. And that life that we wanted to create, me and my wife, was a life where we took money off the table. We essentially would create a life where we would absolutely not have to worry about money, but we would use the money that we were making in some way to design a radically different future. And this is what financial independence is all about. The acronym FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. Essentially, it's a stage on the money journey, and everybody is on a money journey. Most people are not aware that they're on a money journey. Some people are living paycheck to paycheck. Some people are at a place where they have some savings. Some people are working towards a form of retirement, whereas other people like myself, we're working towards financial independence, where we would have essentially the option for early retirement. We could choose to do with our lives whatever we wanted to do, and we're not forced to essentially have to choose a particular career or stay in a particular career because we we had no other options. Financial independence essentially gives you the option to do whatever you want to do. And we achieved financial independence in 2017 at the age of 34 for me. And what that meant was that from a monetary or financial perspective, our financial net worth essentially worked out to be at least 25 times our annual expenses. That's what our net worth became as at that stage of my life. The other definition of financial independence is a stage by which the income coming from your assets, whether you are investing through the stock market or investing, into property, for example, or investing into other business assets, provided the income coming from those assets exceeds your monthly expenses, then you are deemed to be financially independent. And what that then gives you is the option for early retirement. So if you wanted to choose to do that, then you are set to have FIRE, i.e. FIRE. Now, financial independence, having achieved that, has changed my life. In April 2020, having really worked to the top of my career, at such a young age, I really fancied doing something else. I created this company called The Humble Penny with my wife and the sister company, Financial Joy Academy. And it had really taken off, to the extent that we were essentially reaching thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. And collectively, we've served, a few million people online by sharing information to empower families to take full control of their finances and design a radically different life. I hadn't envisioned this to be where my life would go, although I would have loved for it to become where I ended up essentially. But financial independence essentially gave me the possibility to quit my day job, in the city as a chief financial officer this year in 2020, when we've had the biggest shock to most people's lives, given the pandemic we've all been facing. I took that leap to focus on running the Humble Penny and Financial Joy Academy full-time with my wife, because we'd got to that place in our financial lives where we could do that. One of the key elements, and this is where the investing comes in, one of the key elements for allowing us to be able to do this is because we chose to invest our money in the right assets. So I'm now going to talk to you about what we chose to do and how you might be able to explore investing your money in order to become financially independent yourself. The very first thing that we started to do was that we started to invest in individual stocks at the very beginning. I'm talking here back in 2009/10. That was the very beginning of our journey. And we started to invest in some tech stocks in the US. And what that did for us was that it introduced us to this idea of investing our own money, kind of understanding how companies work. With my background in chartered accountancy, in finance, I already had a very good understanding. But this putting my own money to work actually made this even more real, because I had to really understand what I was doing in order to really see some returns on my money. But what that did, because I actually made some money and lost some money by choosing individual stocks, I had to think about a way to manage the risks that I faced, this specific risk tied to individual companies. So what we then started to do was that we chose a completely different strategy to investing our money through the stock market. The strategy we chose was passive investing. We chose to invest our money in passive trackers, namely index funds and ETFs, with those trackers tracking specific indexes around the world, particularly focused in the US. So for example, we chose ETFs and index funds that tracked the likes of the S&P 500, for example. But our goal was to create a simple global portfolio with about 3 to 4 index funds and ETFs. We had a sufficient allocation, with the majority of our allocation being to the US from a stock market perspective. But our approach to financial independence is a multi-asset approach. So what we were doing parallel to investing our money through the stock market using passive investing was also to begin investing into our own property. So we bought a home, and our home was essentially a big part of our long-term goal as a family. My wife, Mary, and I said to ourselves, this will become our 10-year goal. We'd buy this house, and our goal will be to take a 25-year mortgage and pay that mortgage off as quickly as we can. So our game plan in our multi-asset approach was to have overpayments be made into our property. And we went from a 25-year mortgage to a 15-year mortgage by overpayments, and gradually to eventually ending up in 2019 paying off our mortgage in 7 years. We took out took out that mortgage in 2012 and paid that house off in 2019, paying off a total of about £390,000, including about £60,000 of interest in that total amount. What that did was that completely changed our lives completely, because what that did for us was that it totally reduced the amount of expenses we have every single month as a family, leaving us with typical costs that you might have, living costs such as your council tax, your electricity and gas, your Wi-Fi and things like that, and your food costs. And made this idea of becoming financially independent completely possible for us, because once you've removed housing costs, you're now able to build a portfolio that's able to sustain you over time, even if you started to withdraw a certain percent, say 3 to 4% of that portfolio every single year. Okay. Now, in parallel to also investing in our home and overpaying, what we also did was to focus on career maximization. So I spoke to you earlier about my career in finance. My wife was also working and helping to support our family business. And by that, I mean my extended family business with my mother and my dad and so on. We ran some nursery businesses. And by doing that, with me focusing a great deal on my career, what that did for me was that my income rose rapidly over time. Going from a mere trainee chartered accountant to becoming qualified and working my way up over the last 13 to 14 years to become a chief financial officer meant that I was able to increase my income whilst keeping my lifestyle flat. So we did not have the lifestyle creep that you might ordinarily associate with people who earn income that's increasing over time. And what that did for us was that it created a massive buffer, because my wife and I had basically subscribed for the lifestyle of simple living. So we'd minimalized our lifestyles, essentially moved on from living and following the Joneses, but focused exclusively on really living a life that we enjoyed, but one that didn't cost us so much money. What that meant was that all the excess money each month from our income less our expenses was a high enough savings rate, which is the number one metric that needs to be tracked for anybody who's trying to become financially independent. We were saving and investing at least 60% at the height of it of our net income, with that money going to a combination of mortgage overpayments, investments through the stock market, and our third strategy, which was property investing. With the property investing, I had started off in 2008 with my first flat, which is a home that I bought when I moved out with very little deposit, but with mostly a loan from the bank. Over time, that property, which I bought in London, began to do well. And what that meant was that it really set us off on a different pathway in terms of being able to invest in property as a totally different asset class from an investment perspective. We were able to take some equity from that property and explore investing in another property that's able to provide us with an income over time. And from doing that, we've been able to extend that approach of investing in property simply by being able to take some equity from properties that we'd invested in previously in order to be able to create for ourselves a completely different income. So the combination of investing initially in the stock market, investing in individual stocks, and then following a passive investing strategy, and then focusing on career maximization, and then focusing on lifestyle simplification, and then focusing on overpaying on our mortgage to become mortgage free by our mid-30s, and then finally focusing on property investing meant that we therefore had multiple different assets generating income for us over time for a life where we had very minimal costs. And that therefore created for us essentially a life that we would never have believed would actually become real one day. One where we would have the optionality to be able to take a leap from a very promising CFO role in the city to be able to head off and pursue my passion project, which is what the Humble Penny has become. The Humble Penny and Financial Joy Academy are passion projects because we saw that as the bigger opportunity, the ability for us to essentially be able to impact millions of lives in the future. And we're only 3 years old as a company, as a young educational company. But we see this as a platform that will change many lives financially, and it is already doing so. We run a YouTube channel. If you head over to YouTube and search The Humble Penny, we launched on YouTube last year, and we now have around 35,000 subscribers. And the work we're doing is one that's truly changing lives. And for me, without pursuing financial independence as a framework, none of what we see today would have happened at all. In fact, one point I didn't make at the very beginning was how I actually came across financial independence at all. It came from me reading and really exploring how other people had over time built wealth. I was reading lots of personal development books, and one book in particular stood out to me, the book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which I read, and that book seemed to expose my mind to a life beyond just being an employee, but a life where I could potentially one day, even with my immigrant background, become somebody who would become an investor, who would own assets, but also become somebody who would own a business one day. And so I set off and had that framework in my mind when I met my wife with a similar mindset. We chose this journey of financial independence as the ultimate destination for us as a family. And it's radically changed our lives in so many ways. I am now, just to give you an idea, able to spend so much time with my children. The fact that, we've had the global pandemic, we haven't had to worry about our finances because the home we live in is completely paid off and is mortgage free. Our assets are able to generate as an income, and we're able to run our online platform, and pursue our passions and truly do work that we would never have dreamt is something that we would have been able to do ordinarily. And so financial independence has completely, utterly, in fact, changed my entire family line. Because what it's done is giving my children a completely different destiny. The fact that we've chosen to use money differently in a very creative way to create opportunities for ourselves in the future has just meant that even in our 30s, and I've just turned 37, in our 30s, we're living a life that we would never have dreamt. When I moved to this country just over 22 years ago, I would never have dreamt would have been a possibility. So as you watch this, if financial independence is something that you think sounds like an interesting idea, if the FIRE movement sounds like something that might appeal to you at your stage of life, I'd recommend checking out some of our resources. So we have a YouTube channel, like I mentioned earlier. Head over to YouTube and just type in The Humble Penny and check out some of our content, which is being created really to help and empower people in this subject of FIRE. We also have our blog at thehumblepenny.com, which you can head over and check out as well. Finally, we've created a platform for the people we call our dream makers. This is at financialjoyacademy.com. That platform is where we are using, it's essentially a membership program that we've created to help at least 10,000 families achieve financial independence this decade, from 2020 to 2030. It's a daring move, but I'm super excited because I know it's possible. For someone like me to have achieved such a goal, such an outcome, and this is just the beginning as well in our financial lives. As our assets over time continue to build and compound over time, I believe that other people, if they really thought about money to improve their relationships with money, if they really thought about money from a life design perspective, can ultimately begin to design a life that's radically different to perhaps the lives that their parents lived, or perhaps the lives that their peers lived. They'll be able to create a totally different life outcome, a much more favorable and joyful life outcome, simply by pursuing this goal of financial independence. Thank you so much for watching this particular session. I hope you've really enjoyed it. Do feel free to keep in touch across the various platforms that I mentioned. You can also follow us if you use Instagram or something like that, at The Humble Penny. Thank you so much, and feel free to get in touch. Take care and hopefully speak soon.